The first gunshot shattered the peaceful evening air, jolting Olivia Bennett awake from her light slumber. She bolted upright in bed, her heart hammering against her ribs as more shots followed, accompanied by the terrifying sounds of splintering wood, shattering glass, and men shouting. Through the thin walls of their farmhouse on the outskirts of Guthrie, Oklahoma Territory, she could hear her father's voice urgent, commanding, telling her mother to take the children and run. It was 1889, just months after the land run had opened the unassigned lands to settlement. The Bennett family had staked their claim, built their modest home, and begun to forge a life in this untamed frontier. Now that life was exploding around her. "Olivia, get the little ones." Her mother burst into the room, face ashen in the dim lamplight, clutching Olivia's baby brother to her chest. At 22, Olivia was the oldest of the 4 Bennett children. She sprang from her bed, nightgown billowing around her as she rushed to the adjoining room where her younger siblings slept. 9-year-old Samuel was already awake, eyes wide with terror, while 7-year-old Emma stood trembling beside her bed. "We need to go," Olivia whispered, reaching for their hands. "Be very quiet." The back door was their destination. Her father had always said if trouble came, they should flee toward the creek where the brush would provide cover. But as they reached the kitchen, the door burst open. Olivia pulled her siblings behind her, shielding them with her body as 3 men stormed in, bandanas pulled over their faces, revolvers gleaming in the dim light. "Looky here," one of them drawled. "Found ourselves some more." Her mother screamed from somewhere outside, the sound abruptly cut short by what Olivia knew instinctively was a gunshot. Emma began to sob behind her. "Please," Olivia begged. "They're just children." The leader stepped forward, eyes cold above his bandana. "Shouldn't have settled on land that ain't yours." The next moments passed in a blur of violence that Olivia would spend years trying to forget. She remembered pushing her siblings toward the back window, remembered the explosion of gunfire, remembered pain slicing through her shoulder as she tumbled outside into the darkness. She remembered running, stumbling, falling into the creek bed, water soaking her nightgown as she crawled beneath an overhanging bank, pressing her hand against her bleeding shoulder. She remembered the flames rising from their home, illuminating the night sky with an unholy light, and the terrible silence that followed when the raiders finally rode away. Dawn found her still hiding, shivering with shock and cold, her nightgown stiff with dried blood. The smoke from her family's home hung in the air like a shroud. Olivia forced herself to her feet, stumbling back toward the ruins of everything she had ever known, praying that somehow, by some miracle, she would find survivors. She found only ashes and death. Neighbors from a mile away had seen the flames and arrived too late to help, but in time to bury the dead. Numb with shock and grief, Olivia watched as her parents and siblings were laid to rest in the hard Oklahoma earth. The settlers were kind, offering shelter and sympathy, but their fear was palpable. The raiders might return. No one was safe. "You can stay with us," Mrs. Wilkins said, arm around Olivia's shoulders as they stood before the freshly covered graves. But Olivia knew she couldn't remain. This land, which had once represented hope and a new beginning, now held only horror. With her family gone and the homestead destroyed, there was nothing to keep her here. "I have an aunt in Tucson," she lied, not wanting to burden these good people with her presence or put them at risk. "I'll take the stage when it comes through." 2 days later, with her shoulder crudely bandaged and dressed in borrowed clothes, Olivia boarded the westbound stagecoach with nothing but a small bundle containing a change of clothes, her mother's wedding ring, and $5 pressed upon her by the sympathetic community. She had no plan beyond escaping the memories that threatened to suffocate her. The stage lurched forward, and Olivia stared out the window at the receding landscape, tears blurring her vision. She had no aunt in Tucson, no family anywhere. She was entirely, devastatingly alone in the world. The journey west was long and punishing. The stagecoach rattled over rough terrain, stopping at way stations where Olivia barely ate, barely slept, barely spoke. Her wound throbbed, occasionally reopening and seeping through the bandage. Fellow passengers came and went, but she hardly noticed them, lost in her grief and pain. At a remote station in the Texas Panhandle, the stage driver announced a 2-day delay for repairs. The passengers grumbled and dispersed to find accommodations in the small settlement. Olivia stood alone beside the disabled coach, her meager funds nearly depleted, uncertain where to go or what to do next. "You all right, miss?" a deep voice asked. Olivia turned to see a tall man approaching, leading a magnificent chestnut horse. He wore a trail-worn hat pulled low, a blue shirt beneath a leather vest, and chaps over denim trousers. A gun belt encircled his hips, but it was his eyes that caught her attention, clear, blue, and direct, assessing her with concern rather than suspicion. "I'm fine," she answered automatically, though she swayed slightly on her feet. The stranger's gaze narrowed. "You don't look fine. You look like you're about to fall over." Before Olivia could protest, her knees buckled. The man moved swiftly, catching her before she hit the ground. She felt the strength in his arms as he steadied her, smelled leather and horses and the clean scent of soap. "I'm sorry," she murmured, mortified by her weakness. "Don't apologize. When's the last time you ate something proper?" Olivia couldn't remember. The days had blurred together since the raid. The man seemed to read her silence correctly. "That's what I thought. Come on. There's a decent place to eat just down the way." I don't have much money left," she admitted, hating the vulnerability in her voice. He studied her face for a long moment. "My name's Caleb Atkins. I'm foreman at the Triple R Ranch about 20 miles from here, and a meal isn't going to bankrupt me, Miss Bennett. Olivia Bennett. Miss Bennett, I insist. You need food, and frankly, you look like you could use a friendly face." Olivia hesitated, years of proper upbringing warring with her desperate circumstances. But there was something trustworthy in Caleb Atkins' weathered face, and her empty stomach made the decision for her. "Thank you, Mr. Atkins." The eatery was small but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the aroma of fresh baked bread. Caleb ordered them both a hearty meal of beef stew, biscuits, and coffee. Olivia tried to eat slowly, maintaining some dignity, but the first taste of real food in days weakened her resolve. She consumed everything on her plate, color gradually returning to her pale cheeks. "Better?" Caleb asked when she'd finished, a hint of a smile softening his sun-lined face. "Yes." "Thank you." Olivia set down her spoon, suddenly self-conscious. "You're very kind to a stranger. Out here, being neighborly isn't kindness, it's survival." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Now, Miss Bennett, I don't mean to pry, but you're traveling alone, you're injured." His eyes flicked to her shoulder, where a small stain had seeped through her dress. "And you've clearly been through something terrible. Is there someone expecting you somewhere?" The direct question brought tears to Olivia's eyes. She blinked them back, determined not to break down in this public place. "No, there's no one," Caleb nodded, as if her answer confirmed a suspicion. "Raiders," the word made her flinch. "How did you know? We've had trouble with them too." "Gang of outlaws hitting isolated homesteads, taking what they want, leaving destruction behind." His jaw tightened. "They killed one of our hands last month when he was checking fence lines." "They killed everyone," Olivia whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. My parents, my brother and sisters, our home in Guthrie, everything's gone. Caleb's expression darkened with anger, then softened with compassion. I'm sorry, Miss Bennett, truly. They sat in silence for a moment, the busy sounds of the eatery continuing around them. Where were you headed? He finally asked. I told the neighbors I had an aunt in Tucson. Olivia gave a bitter little laugh. I don't have anyone anywhere, I just needed to leave. Caleb considered this, turning his coffee cup in his hands. The Triple R could use a cook's helper, he said casually. Our chuck wagon cook, Hank, is getting on in years and could use an extra pair of hands. It's honest work, pays fair, and includes room and board. Olivia stared at him, startled by the unexpected offer. You'd hire me. You don't even know me. I know you've survived something that would break most people. I know you're determined enough to get on that stage with an untended wound rather than be a burden to neighbors. His blue eyes held her steadily. That tells me plenty about your character, Miss Bennett. I don't know the first thing about ranch cooking, she admitted. Can you follow instructions? Work hard, learn? Yes, but then you can learn to cook for cowboys. They're not particular, just hungry. Hope flickered within Olivia for the first time since the raid. Why would you do this for me? Caleb's expression grew distant, as if seeing something beyond the walls of the small eatery. Because someone did something similar for me once when I needed it, and because those raiders have hurt too many good people. He refocused on her face. You don't have to decide right now. Think about it overnight. I'm picking up supplies and heading back to the ranch tomorrow noon. That night, in a small room above the general store that the shopkeeper's wife had let for a reduced rate, Olivia considered her options. She had barely enough money for another stage ticket, and no destination in mind. The work Caleb offered was a lifeline, a chance to recover, to earn her keep, to have a roof over her head while she healed in body and spirit. By morning, her decision was made. She met Caleb outside the general store where he was loading supplies into a wagon. Good morning, Miss Bennett, he greeted her, tipping his hat. Have you thought about my offer? I have, Olivia said, gathering her courage. I accept, Mr. Atkins, thank you. He nodded, the hint of a smile touching his lips. Glad to hear it. Let's get your shoulder looked at properly before we head out. Doc Evans has an office just down the street. The doctor confirmed what Olivia had suspected: her wound was infected. He cleaned it thoroughly, applied a poultice, and bandaged it with fresh dressings, giving her stern instructions to keep it clean and rest her arm as much as possible. You're lucky, he told her. Another few days and blood poisoning might have set in. By the time they left town, the stagecoach repairs were complete, but Olivia didn't look back as it departed without her. Instead, she sat beside Caleb on the wagon seat, facing forward toward an uncertain future, but one that suddenly held possibility rather than just emptiness. The journey to the Triple R took most of the afternoon. As they traveled, Caleb pointed out landmarks and explained the boundaries of the ranch. Triple R is one of the bigger spreads in these parts, he told her. Owned by the Randall family for 2 generations. Old man Randall passed last year, so his son Richard runs it now with his wife Mary. Good people, fair employers. And they won't mind you bringing back a stranger, Olivia asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. They trust my judgment, Caleb replied simply. And they know we need help in the kitchen. As the wagon crested a rise, the ranch came into view, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley, with corrals, barns, bunkhouses, and a large main house. Cattle dotted the surrounding pastures, and riders moved among them, tiny figures in the distance. Home, Caleb said, a note of pride in his voice. Been working here 15 years now, started as just another hand and worked my way up. It's beautiful, Olivia murmured, taking in the peaceful scene, so different from the chaos and destruction she'd fled. As they approached the main house, a woman emerged onto the porch, plump and pleasant-faced, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. She waved as they drew near. "That's Mrs. Randall," Caleb explained. "She oversees the household." Mary Randall welcomed them warmly, her kindly eyes taking in Olivia's pale face and bandaged shoulder without comment. "Caleb sent word ahead that he'd found us some help," she said, ushering Olivia inside. "You're most welcome here, dear. We've prepared a room for you in the house, just off the kitchen." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window overlooking a kitchen garden. To Olivia, who had expected quarters in a bunkhouse or barn, it seemed luxurious. "You rest tonight," Mary instructed. "Tomorrow's soon enough to start learning your duties." That evening, Olivia joined the household for supper. Mary and Richard Randall, their teenage son James, Caleb as foreman, and Hank the cook, a grizzled old man with a perpetual squint and surprising gentleness in his manner. The meal was simple but abundant, the conversation easy and inclusive, with no probing questions about her past. Later, as she helped Mary clear the table despite protests that she should rest, Olivia caught Caleb watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable. When their eyes met, he nodded once, as if confirming something to himself, then turned to discuss ranch matters with Richard. That night, in the unfamiliar bed, Olivia lay awake listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night, so different from the city noises of her childhood or the wild sounds that had surrounded their homestead. For the first time since the raid, she felt a measure of safety, though the grief remained, a constant ache beneath her breastbone. She wondered about Caleb Atkins, his kindness to a stranger, the respect everyone showed him, the quiet authority he carried without arrogance. There was a story there, she sensed, just as there was now in her own life, a before and an after, divided by violence and loss. Sleep finally claimed her, and for once, her dreams were not filled with fire and gunshots and the faces of her lost family, but with open skies and the promise of tomorrow. The days that followed established a new rhythm for Olivia. Each morning she rose early to help Hank prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, hearty fare of biscuits, bacon, eggs, and strong coffee. The old cook was gruff but patient, showing her how to manage the wood stove, teaching her the tricks to making dough rise properly in variable weather, instructing her in the art of cooking for hungry men who needed sustenance rather than delicacy. "Men who work cattle need fuel," he told her, demonstrating how to make his famous sourdough bread. "They don't care if it's pretty, just that there's plenty and it sticks to their ribs." As her shoulder healed, Olivia took on more responsibilities, gathering eggs from the henhouse, tending the kitchen garden, learning to make soap and candles under Mary's guidance. The work was hard but satisfying, giving her tired body purpose and her troubled mind respite from grief. She saw Caleb daily but rarely spoke with him at length. He left early with the men and returned late, overseeing the endless tasks that kept the ranch running. Sometimes she would catch him watching her across the dining room, his blue eyes thoughtful, but he never intruded on her privacy or presumed upon the fact that he had rescued her from desperate circumstances. 3 weeks after her arrival, as Olivia was hanging laundry in the yard, she spotted riders approaching 4 men, moving fast, dust billowing behind them. She shaded her eyes, heart suddenly racing with instinctive fear. One of the ranch hands shouted an alarm, and men began running toward the house, rifles appearing in their hands. Caleb emerged from the barn, shotgun in hand. "Get inside, Olivia," he ordered, voice sharp with urgency. She dropped the laundry and ran for the kitchen door, memories of the raid surging back with paralyzing force. Inside, Mary was calmly but quickly gathering ammunition from a cabinet. "Raiders?" Olivia asked, her voice breaking. "Don't know yet," Mary replied. Could just be trouble. Either way, we're ready." Through the window, Olivia watched as Caleb and several hands formed a line, weapons raised as the riders approached. There was a tense moment as the strangers reined in, hands carefully visible. Words were exchanged that she couldn't hear. Then Caleb lowered his shotgun, nodding to the others to do the same. The visitors were not raiders but neighboring ranchers bringing news a herd of Triple R cattle had been found 10 miles south, driven off during the night. The young cowhand watching them found tied to a tree, beaten but alive. "They're getting bolder," Richard Randall said grimly when the men had gathered in the ranch yard to discuss the situation. "First isolated homesteads, now they're hitting established ranches. We need to form a posse," one of the neighbors insisted. "Track them to their hideout, end this once and for all." "The sheriff's tried that," another replied. "These men are ghosts, they hit and disappear." From her position at the kitchen window, Olivia saw Caleb step forward. "We know they camp somewhere in the Copper Canyon area. That's where tracks always lead before disappearing. We need scouts, men who can watch and wait for them to return after a raid." The discussion continued, voices rising and falling as plans were made. Eventually, it was decided that 3 men from each ranch would form a watch rotation, taking turns observing the canyon area while maintaining enough hands at each ranch for protection and daily work. That evening, Caleb found Olivia alone on the back porch, staring out at the darkening land. The ranch had settled into an uneasy alertness, with extra guards posted and weapons checked and rechecked. "You all right?" he asked quietly, leaning against the porch rail beside her. She nodded, not trusting her voice immediately. "It brought it all back," she finally said. "Seeing those riders approach, not knowing. I understand." His voice was gentle. "First time I saw raiders after losing my family, I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Felt like I was back there, watching it happen all over again." Olivia turned to look at him, startled by this revelation. "You lost your family to raiders too?" Caleb's face was half in shadow, his profile etched against the fading light. "Comanche raid, 17 years ago. I was 15, out hunting. Came home to find our farm burned, my parents and little sister dead." He spoke matter-of-factly, though she could hear the old pain underneath the words. "Difference is, I had somewhere to go. My uncle took me in, brought me to his ranch in East Texas, taught me everything I know about cattle and horses." "Is that why you helped me?" Olivia asked softly. "Because you'd been through the same thing." He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Partly. Mostly it was because you needed helping and I was there to do it." He shifted, turning to face her fully. "You're doing well here, Olivia. Hank says you're the best helper he's ever had." The unexpected compliment warmed her. "He's a good teacher. Everyone here has been kind." "It's a good place," Caleb agreed. "The Randalls treat people fair, expect honest work in return. It's why I've stayed all these years." They stood in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear, countless pinpoints of brightness in the vast darkness. "I'm riding out tomorrow," Caleb said eventually, "taking the first watch at Copper Canyon with 2 of the hands." Anxiety tightened Olivia's chest. "Be careful. These men, they're cruel. They enjoy hurting people." "I know." His voice hardened slightly. "That's why they need to be stopped." Impulsively, Olivia reached out, touching his arm. "Thank you for everything you've done for me." In the dim light, she saw his expression soften. His hand covered hers briefly, warm and calloused. "You're welcome, Miss Bennett. Then he straightened, tipping his hat. "Best get some rest. Dawn comes early." As he walked away, Olivia remained on the porch, her hand still warm where he had touched it, a strange, fluttering sensation in her stomach that had nothing to do with fear. The following weeks brought a tense vigilance to the ranch. The men took turns riding out for watch duty at the canyon, while those who remained kept loaded weapons close at hand. Olivia threw herself into her work, expanding her duties to help wherever needed as some of the usual hands were away on patrol. She learned to ride better, accompanying Mary to deliver meals to men working distant sections of the ranch. She became adept at spotting approaching riders from afar, distinguishing between the familiar gaits of returning ranch hands and the unknown patterns of strangers. Always her eyes sought out Caleb whenever he returned from patrol, relief washing through her at the sight of him safe and whole. They spoke more often now, brief conversations about the day's work or longer talks in the evenings when he wasn't on patrol duty. She learned that he had taught himself to read from a Bible and a handful of dime novels, that he could play the harmonica but only melancholy tunes, that he dreamed of having his own small ranch someday. In turn, she told him about growing up in Chicago, the daughter of a schoolteacher father and a mother who had insisted they move west for her husband's health, about her siblings and the dreams they'd had for their homestead in Oklahoma Territory. Speaking of them hurt, but less sharply than before, as if sharing the memories gave them a place to exist outside the horror of their end. Summer turned to early autumn, bringing cooler evenings but no resolution to the threat hanging over the region. The raiders seemed to have gone quiet, which only increased the tension rather than relieving it. "They're planning something," Richard said one evening as the household gathered after supper. "This silence isn't good." "Maybe they've moved on to other territory," Mary suggested, though her tone indicated she didn't believe it. "No," Richard shook his head. "They're waiting for us to lower our guard." He was right. 3 nights later, Olivia was awakened by shouting and the crack of gunfire. She bolted from her bed, grabbing the revolver Mary had insisted she keep nearby, and rushed to the window. In the yard, illuminated by the light of a nearly full moon, she could see men on horseback exchanging fire with defenders on the ground. The raiders had come. Heart pounding, she pulled on a dress over her nightgown and ran to the kitchen. Mary was already there, loading a shotgun, face set in determined lines. "Stay inside," she ordered Olivia. "If they breach the house, use that revolver. Don't hesitate." Olivia nodded, hands steady despite her fear. This was not like the night her family died. She was not helpless now. Not alone. Through the windows, she could see the battle unfolding. The raiders, at least a dozen men, had expected to surprise sleeping victims, but instead had ridden into prepared defenders. R hands fired from behind barrels, wagons, and the corners of buildings, their positions carefully planned for just this scenario. She recognized Caleb's tall figure moving from one position to another, directing the defense with cool precision. As she watched, he dropped to one knee, took careful aim with a rifle and fired. One of the raiders tumbled from his horse. The attackers, realizing they'd lost the element of surprise, began to fall back, firing as they retreated. For a moment, it seemed they would escape as they had so many times before. Then, Olivia saw Caleb leap onto a saddled horse one kept ready by the corral and signal to several hands who did the same. "No," she whispered, pressing her hand against the glass as she realized what they intended. Caleb and the others were going to pursue the raiders, to follow them back to their hideout rather than letting them vanish once more. It was necessary, she knew. It was brave. It was also terrifying to watch him ride deliberately into danger. The night passed with agonizing slowness. 2 hands had been wounded in the attack, one seriously, and Olivia helped Mary tend to them as the ranch's more experienced men joined the pursuit. By dawn, the wounded were stable, the ranch secured, but no word had come from Caleb and the others. Around noon, a rider approached one of the Triple R hands who had joined the pursuit. He was exhausted, his horse lathered, but his news electrified the ranch. They had tracked the raiders to their hideout in Copper Canyon, surrounding them with help from men from neighboring ranches who had heard the gunfire and joined the chase. The sheriff had been sent for, but Caleb and the others needed reinforcements to hold the outlaws until he arrived with deputies. Richard Randall immediately organized a second group to ride out, leaving only the minimum number of men needed to protect the ranch. As they prepared to depart, Olivia approached Richard. "I'm coming too," she said firmly. "Absolutely not," Richard replied, checking his rifle. "It's too dangerous." "I'm a good rider now and I can shoot," Olivia insisted, "and you might need someone to tend wounds." "Mary can't leave the ranch with the injured men here." Richard hesitated, looking to his wife. Mary studied Olivia's determined face and nodded slowly. "She's right. Take her. Just keep her back from any fighting." And so Olivia found herself riding toward Copper Canyon with the reinforcement party, a medical kit secured to her saddle, her revolver loaded and holstered at her hip. Fear coiled in her stomach, not for herself but for Caleb and the others who had been holding the raiders at bay for hours. The canyon came into view by mid-afternoon, a rugged slash in the earth with steep walls and a narrow entrance. Near that entrance, behind hastily assembled barricades of rocks and fallen timber, Caleb and about 15 men from various ranches were positioned, keeping watch on the canyon where the raiders were trapped. Relief surged through Olivia at the sight of Caleb, alive and uninjured, though exhausted and grimy from the night's pursuit. His surprise at seeing her quickly gave way to understanding when she explained her role. "We've got 3 men with minor wounds," he told her, leading her to a sheltered area where the injured were resting. "Nothing life-threatening, but they could use proper tending." As Olivia cleaned and bandaged cuts and bullet grazes, she listened to the men discuss the situation. The raiders, about 20 in all, were holed up in a cabin deep in the canyon, surrounded but still dangerous. The sheriff and his deputies were expected by nightfall. "What then?" she asked Caleb when she had finished with the wounded. "Justice," he said simply, his blue eyes hard as he gazed toward the canyon. "For your family, for all the families they've destroyed." Darkness fell, bringing a tense vigil. The defenders maintained their positions, watching for any attempt at escape. Olivia remained with the wounded, but her eyes constantly sought out Caleb's figure, outlined against the starlit sky as he moved among the men, checking positions, offering encouragement, ever vigilant. The sheriff arrived with 6 deputies just before midnight. After a brief conference, it was decided they would wait for dawn before moving in to capture the outlaws. "Less chance of them slipping away in daylight," the sheriff explained. "And I don't want to lose any more men than necessary to these vermin." As the night deepened, Olivia found herself seated beside Caleb behind their barricade, sharing coffee from a canteen. The autumn air was chilly, and she huddled in a borrowed jacket too large for her frame. "You should try to rest," Caleb told her, his voice low. "Tomorrow will be dangerous." "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, not knowing what might happen. He studied her face in the dim light. "You've changed since that day I found you at the stage station, stronger now, not just surviving but living." The observation surprised her, but as she considered it, Olivia realized he was right. The crushing grief and terror that had defined her existence after the raid had gradually given way to something else, not healing exactly, but a determination to forge forward despite the wounds life had inflicted. "The Triple R has been good for me," she said softly. "You have been good for me." Something flickered in Caleb's eyes, and emotion quickly masked. "I just offered you a job." "You offered me more than that," Olivia countered gently. "You offered me a chance when I had none, a place to belong when I had nowhere." He was silent for a long moment, then reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch light but sending warmth through her despite the cold night. "Get some rest, Olivia. Stay back tomorrow. I don't want you in the line of fire." She wanted to argue but saw the concern in his face and nodded. "Be careful, Caleb." "I couldn't bear." She stopped, uncertain how to finish that sentence without revealing feelings she herself was just beginning to understand. He seemed to hear the unspoken words anyway. His hand briefly covered hers, a promise without words, before he moved away to check the perimeter once more. Dawn broke clear and cold. The sheriff's plan was straightforward. They would advance into the canyon from multiple directions, surrounding the cabin, and call for the raiders to surrender. If they refused, they would take the cabin by force. Olivia watched from a position well back from the action, heart in her throat, as Caleb and the others moved forward into the canyon. The morning stillness was broken by the sheriff's booming voice demanding surrender, offering the chance for a trial rather than a bullet. For a terrible moment, silence followed. Then gunfire erupted from the cabin, a desperate, last stand from men who knew capture meant the gallows. The defenders returned fire, taking cover behind rocks and trees as they gradually closed in on the structure. The battle seemed to last an eternity, but was over in less than an hour. 3 of the raiders were dead, the rest wounded or surrendering when their ammunition ran low. Among the lawmen and ranchers, there were injuries but miraculously no fatalities. Olivia rushed forward as the shooting stopped, medical kit in hand. She moved among the wounded, bandaging and comforting, searching all the while for Caleb's tall figure. When she finally spotted him helping secure the captured raiders, relief made her knees weak. He was alive, apparently unharmed, though blood stained his shirt sleeve. "You're hurt," she said, reaching him as the sheriff's deputies began leading the prisoners away. Caleb glanced at his arm as if noticing the injury for the first time. "Just a graze. Others need attention more." "Let me see it anyway," she insisted, guiding him to a boulder where she could examine the wound. It was indeed just a graze, but she cleaned and bandaged it carefully, her hands gentle against his sun-browned skin. "We got them all," Caleb told her as she worked. "The leader confessed they've been raiding farms and ranches across 3 territories. He'll hang for sure, along with the worst of the others." "Good," Olivia said fiercely, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. She had never wished death on anyone before, but these men had taken everything from her, had destroyed countless lives with their brutality. Caleb studied her face. "Does it help, knowing they'll face justice?" She considered the question honestly. "It doesn't bring my family back, but yes, it helps to know they can't hurt anyone else." She finished securing the bandage and looked up at him. "And it helps to know that good men like you exist in the same world as men like them." Something shifted in Caleb's expression, a softening around his eyes. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. "Olivia Bennett, you are the bravest woman I've ever known." Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the sheriff calling for everyone to prepare to move out. The moment passed, but something had changed between them, a recognition of feelings too powerful to remain unacknowledged for long. The journey back to Triple R was subdued but marked by an undercurrent of triumph and relief. The raiders who had terrorized the region for months were captured or dead. Their reign of violence finally ended. Communities could begin to heal, to rebuild what had been destroyed. For Olivia, the return to the ranch brought an unexpected clarity. As she watched Caleb being welcomed back as a hero, saw the respect in the eyes of the other hands, she realized that somewhere along the way, this place and these people had become more than just a temporary haven. They had become home in a way she had never thought possible again after the raid. And Caleb's strong, quiet, honorable Caleb had become far more than just her benefactor or employer. The feelings that had been growing within her could no longer be denied or mistaken for mere gratitude. Several days after their return, as life at the ranch began to settle back into normal rhythms, Olivia found Caleb in the barn late one evening. He was brushing down his horse, movements methodical and gentle despite the strength in his hands. "I thought you might be here," she said, stepping into the warm, hay-scented space. He looked up, a smile touching his lips at the sight of her. "Just finishing up. Jupiter here deserves extra care after carrying me to justice and back." Olivia approached, reaching out to stroke the horse's velvet nose. "He's a fine animal." "Best I've ever had," Caleb agreed, setting aside the brush. "Did you need something, Olivia?" She gathered her courage, heart fluttering beneath her ribs. "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done, not just for me, but for everyone affected by those raiders." "No thanks needed. It was the right thing to do." "Even so." She stepped closer, eyes meeting his. "I've been thinking about what happens next." Caleb's expression grew careful, guarded. "Next? Now that the raiders are caught, there's no more danger. I could go anywhere, start fresh somewhere new." She saw something flicker in his eyes, concern, perhaps even dismay, and pressed on quickly. "But I don't want to." "You don't." The guardedness gave way to cautious hope. "No." Olivia took another step toward him, close enough now that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I've lost one home, Caleb. I don't want to leave another. I don't want to leave the Triple R. I don't want to leave you." His breath caught audibly. For a long moment he stood perfectly still, searching her face. Then, slowly, he reached for her, his hand gentle against her cheek just as it had been that day in the canyon. "When I found you at that stage station," he said quietly, "all I saw was someone who needed help. I never expected." He trailed off, seeming to struggle for words. "Neither did I," Olivia whispered. "How could I have known that in the middle of so much loss I would find something so precious?" Caleb's eyes darkened. With deliberate care, he bent his head and kissed her, a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened as Olivia responded, her arms sliding around his neck, her body pressing closer to his. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Olivia Bennett," he said simply. "Have for a while now, but didn't think I had any right to say so." "Why ever not?" she asked, wonder in her voice at his declaration. "You came here hurt, grieving, needed sanctuary, not a man with designs on your future." His hand settled at her waist, holding her as if she were precious. "And I'm just a ranch foreman with little to offer a woman like you." Olivia shook her head, smiling through the tears that had sprung to her eyes. "You have everything to offer: strength, honor, kindness. A heart big enough to take in a broken woman and help her find her way back to living." "You were never broken," Caleb corrected her gently. "Wounded, yes. Grieving, yes. But never broken, Olivia. From that first day, I saw the strength in you, the determination to survive despite everything you'd lost." She rose on tiptoe, pressing another kiss to his lips, marveling at how right it felt. "I love you too, Caleb Atkins, and I want to build a life here with you if you'll have me." His answer was another kiss, deeper and more passionate than the first, his arms tightening around her until she was molded against him, two broken people made whole together. Later, as they walked hand in hand from the barn toward the house beneath a sky blazing with stars, Caleb stopped suddenly, turning to face her. "Olivia," he said, his voice serious now, "I need you to understand something. I can't replace what you lost. Your family, the life you had before, nothing can bring that back." "I know that," she replied, touched by his concern. "But I can promise you this," he continued, taking both her hands in his. "You have a family again with me. Maybe not the one you were born to, but one we'll build together day by day, if you'll marry me." The proposal, so simple and heartfelt, brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Caleb." His smile in the starlight was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. They were married 3 weeks later in the triple Artiques main house, with the Randalls, the ranch hands, and neighbors from miles around in attendance. Mary had helped Olivia fashion a wedding dress from cream-colored fabric, ordered specially from the nearest town. Hank had outdone himself preparing a feast, and even the usually stoic ranch hands had decorated the house with autumn flowers and ribbons. Caleb, standing tall and handsome in a new suit, watched with wonder in his eyes as Olivia walked toward him. Richard Randall gave her away, and the circuit riding preacher who had come especially for the occasion spoke of love rising from ashes, of hope reborn from despair. "I take you, Olivia Bennett, as my wife," Caleb vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To protect and cherish all the days of my life. What was broken we will rebuild together. What was lost we will find again in each other." "I take you, Caleb Atkins, as my husband," Olivia responded, her heart so full she could barely speak. "To stand beside through all that comes. You found me when I was lost, gave me hope when I had none. I pledge my life and love to you now and always." The celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing and laughter filling the ranch house. When the newlyweds finally slipped away to the small cabin, Richard had offered them as a wedding gift a cozy structure not far from the main house that had once been the original homestead. They were exhausted, but blissfully happy. "Welcome home, Mrs. Atkins," Caleb said, lifting Olivia over the threshold. She wrapped her arms around his neck, overwhelmed by how far she had come from that terrified, grieving young woman who had boarded a stagecoach with no destination but away. "Home," she repeated. "I never thought I'd have one again." Their first night as husband and wife was tender and passionate, a joining of bodies that had already joined in heart and spirit. Afterward, lying in Caleb's arms as moonlight streamed through the cabin's small window, Olivia felt a sense of peace that had eluded her since the night of the raid. The grief for her lost family would never entirely fade, she knew that, and accepted it. But alongside that grief now bloomed joy and hope, the promise of a future built with the man who had saved her in more ways than one. Winter came to the Triple R, bringing cold winds and occasional snow, but also the cozy intimacy of long evenings by the fire in their cabin. Caleb continued his duties as foreman, while Olivia divided her time between helping in the main house kitchen and making their small home a haven. She planted an indoor herb garden on the windowsill, hung curtains she had sewn herself, and began piecing together a quilt from scraps of fabric gifted by Mary and the neighboring women. Each domestic act felt like reclaiming a piece of normal life, like a declaration that horror and violence would not have the final word in her story. Caleb watched her transforming their cabin with pride and tenderness. "You're blooming," he told her one evening as they sat before the fire, her head resting against his shoulder. "Like one of those desert flowers that only opens after the harshest storm." "Because I have sunlight now," she replied, reaching up to touch his face. "And water, and good soil to put down roots." Their love deepened with each passing day, built on a foundation of shared experience and mutual respect. They talked often of their lost families, keeping their memories alive through stories shared in quiet moments. Sometimes these remembrances brought tears, but increasingly they brought smiles to the bittersweet joy of honoring those who had shaped them. With spring came news that brought both joy and trepidation to the young couple. Olivia was pregnant, expecting their first child in the late autumn. "A baby," Caleb whispered in wonder when she told him, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our child. Are you happy?" Olivia asked, suddenly uncertain. They had spoken of children someday, but not so soon. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," he assured her, gathering her into his arms. Terrified, yes. Overwhelmed, certainly, but mostly just grateful beyond words. As her body changed with the growing life inside her, Olivia experienced moments of intense sorrow, wishing her mother and sisters could share in this journey with her. Mary Randall stepped into the void, offering practical advice and maternal comfort, while the wives of neighboring ranchers brought gifts and wisdom drawn from their own experiences. Caleb became both more protective and more vulnerable, his concern for her well-being sometimes bordering on excessive. "I can still gather eggs," Olivia assured him with fond exasperation when he tried to prevent her from performing even the simplest tasks. "The baby and I won't shatter." "I know," he admitted, chagrined. "It's just I've never had so much to lose before." The honesty of his fear touched her deeply. "Nor have I," she told him, taking his hand and placing it where their child kicked beneath her heart. "But that's the courage of loving, isn't it? Risking loss because what we gain is so precious." Summer brought scorching heat that made Olivia's advancing pregnancy more challenging. Caleb insisted on having a proper water pump installed near their cabin to save her the walk to the well. And Richard Randall, seeing the foreman's devotion to his wife, approved without hesitation. "That man would move mountains for you," Mary observed one afternoon as she and Olivia sat shelling peas in the shade of the main house porch. "Never seen Caleb so settled, so content." "He's given me everything," Olivia replied simply. "A home, a future himself. I only hope I give him half as much in return." Mary's kind eyes crinkled with understanding. "Oh, my dear, you've given him just as much. You've given him family again." Family. The word still sometimes caught in Olivia's throat, tangled with memories of those she had lost. But increasingly it also evoked the present and future Caleb, their coming child, the community they had built around them at the Triple R. Family wasn't just blood, she had learned, but the bonds forged through love, trust, and shared purpose. In late October, as the leaves turned golden and the air grew crisp, Olivia went into labor. The birth was long and difficult, testing her strength to its limits. Caleb paced outside their cabin for hours, alternately praying and cursing as Mary and the local midwife attended his wife. When at last the midwife emerged to tell him he had a son, Caleb nearly collapsed with relief. "And Olivia?" he asked, voice raw with fear and exhaustion. "Tired but well," the midwife assured him. "You have a strong wife, Mr. Atkins." Inside, he found Olivia pale but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle against her breast. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Caleb approached with reverent steps, overwhelmed by the sight of his wife and child. The baby was small but perfectly formed, with a shock of dark hair and his mother's delicate features. "He's beautiful," Caleb whispered, reaching out to touch the infant's impossibly soft cheek. "Just like his mother." "I thought we might name him Samuel," Olivia suggested, tears shimmering in her eyes. "After my brother," Caleb nodded, his own eyes misting. "Samuel Atkins. A good, strong name." He sat carefully beside them on the bed, one arm around Olivia's shoulders, the other supporting their son's tiny body. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair. for giving me a family again." Olivia leaned into him, exhausted but filled with a profound contentment. "We've both come so far from loss," she said quietly. "Who would have thought that day at the stage station that we'd be here now?" "I hoped," Caleb admitted. "Even then, something in me recognized something in you, like my heart knew yours before we did." Looking down at their newborn son, cradled between them in a circle of love neither had thought to find again after such devastating losses, Olivia felt a sense of completion, of having traveled through darkness into unexpected light. Samuel thrived, growing from a delicate newborn into a sturdy, curious infant with his father's blue eyes and his mother's gentle smile. Caleb proved to be a natural father, as tender with his son as he was strong in protecting him. He fashioned a cradle from pine wood, carved toys from scraps of lumber, and spent hours simply watching the baby sleep, wonder on his weathered face. "I never thought I'd have this," he confessed to Olivia one night as they stood together over their sleeping child. "After losing my family, I figured that part of life wasn't meant for me." "Nor I," she agreed, leaning into his embrace. "It's like a miracle, isn't it, that we found each other after such loss, that we've created this beautiful life together." As Samuel's first birthday approached, Caleb began disappearing for hours whenever he could be spared from his duties, returning with sawdust in his hair and a secretive smile. Olivia suspected he was crafting something special for their son, but didn't pry, enjoying the anticipation in her husband's eyes. The surprise was revealed on the morning of Samuel's birthday, a rocking horse, exquisitely carved and painted, with real horsehair for its mane and tail. "He's too small to ride it yet," Caleb acknowledged as Olivia marveled over the craftsmanship. "But he'll grow into it, and in the meantime, it can remind him that his father will always be there to teach him about horses and cattle and all the things a boy should know." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes at the love behind the gift, not just for their son, but for the future Caleb envisioned for their family. "It's perfect," she told him, drawing him down for a kiss. "And I have a surprise for you too." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "For me, it's not my birthday." Olivia smiled, taking his hand and placing it against her stomach. "No, but in about 7 months our family will be growing again." The joy that illuminated Caleb's face was answer enough, but he swept her into his arms anyway, spinning her around before setting her gently back on her feet, mindful of her condition. "Another child," he breathed. "Olivia, you make me the richest man alive." The years passed, marked by the rhythm of ranch life and the milestones of their growing family. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace, arrived safely the following spring. 2 years later, twin boys Michael and James completed their family, bringing joyful chaos to the small cabin that Caleb had gradually expanded to accommodate their needs. Life was not without challenges. Drought struck the region when Samuel was 7, forcing difficult decisions about cattle and land management. A fever swept through the ranch when the twins were toddlers, touching every family but claiming no lives, thanks in part to Olivia's tireless nursing. And always, the inherent dangers of ranch work meant moments of fear when Caleb or the hands were late returning from distant pastures. But these challenges were faced together, with the resilience that both Caleb and Olivia had forged through earlier suffering. Their shared history of loss gave them perspective that helped weather difficulties that might have broken a less tested bond. When Richard Randall decided to retire to a smaller property in town, he approached Caleb with an unexpected proposition: the opportunity to buy a portion of the Triple R, specifically the section that included their cabin and the surrounding 500 acres. "I can't afford that," Caleb said bluntly when Richard named a price far below market value. not without borrowing more than we could repay in a lifetime. You've been more than a foreman to me, Caleb, the older man replied. You've been like a son. Mary and I have watched you and Olivia build something special here. We want to see it continue. After long discussions and careful consideration of their finances, Caleb and Olivia accepted Richard's generous terms. At 40, Caleb became not just a foreman but a rancher in his own right, with land to pass down to his children, a dream he had nurtured since his own youth. They renamed their portion of the land the Second Chance Ranch, a name that held meaning only they fully understood. The original cabin remained the heart of their home, though expanded and improved over the years. Around it grew barns, corrals, a bunkhouse for the few hands they employed, and eventually a proper house with enough rooms for their growing children. Samuel grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's way with horses and his mother's love of books. Grace, spirited and determined, could outride most boys her age and still help her mother with the delicate work of tending the kitchen garden. The twins, different in temperament but united in mischief, kept the entire family on their toes with their adventures and escapades. On the 20th anniversary of the day, Caleb had found Olivia at that distant stage station. They sat together on the porch of their home, watching their children playing in the yard as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple. "Do you ever wonder," Olivia asked, her head resting against her husband's shoulder, "what would have happened if you hadn't stopped to help a stranger that day?" Caleb's arm tightened around her. "I try not to. The thought of never finding you, never having all this," he gestured to encompass their home, their children, the life they had built together. "It's unbearable." "I was so lost," she mused, thinking back to that grief-stricken young woman she had been. "I had no direction, no hope, just the desperate need to get away from memories. And I was just existing," Caleb replied. "Doing my job, getting through each day, never allowing myself to want more because I was afraid to lose it again." Olivia turned her face up to his, noting the silver threading through his still thick hair, the deeper lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship weathered. "We saved each other, I think." "We did," he agreed, bending to kiss her with the same tenderness that had marked their first embrace in the barn so many years before. "And we built something neither of us thought possible after what we'd lost." "A family," Olivia said softly, watching as Samuel helped the twins climb onto the back of a patient old horse while Grace supervised critically. "A family," Caleb echoed, his voice rich with pride and gratitude. "The most precious thing in this world." As twilight deepened into night, stars emerging like diamonds scattered across dark velvet, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place, this moment, this life. The raid that had destroyed her first family would always be part of her story, a scar that had healed but never completely faded. But it was no longer the defining chapter of her existence. That role belonged to what had come after the love she had found with Caleb, the children they had raised together, the home they had built from the ashes of their separate losses. From devastating endings had come the most beautiful beginning. From the darkest night had emerged the brightest dawn. And in a man who had once been a stranger, Olivia Bennett Atkins had found not just a husband but the truth of words spoken on a day when hope seemed impossible to grasp. "You have a family again with me."